Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here at Tim's Station to bring you another faction-focused video on the Cronies. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Lokhust Heavy Destroyer. I really like the fact that they added the Lokhust on there, how all the destroyers kind of get their added extras, and Games Workshop has some interesting names, some of them really cool, some of them, you know, we can't get away from the letter I with Space Marines. And with the destroyers, the old school ones, the ones that have been around forever, we got Lokhust added to their keyword. And within reference of what a Lokhust is, I think it's pretty cool. I think out of everything, happy to see that one. But regardless, enough fanboying over the name. Guys, if you haven't subscribed already, please do turn on that bell for notification. Get notified on all the content I bring here on the table, including more faction-focused videos. Right now, I've been running through all the different destroyer types. So far, we've covered the Ophidians. We got the Lokhust, regular Lokhust destroyers, the hex marks, and we got still to come. We got Scorpex. We got many more units to come with all around with the destroyers. Right now, we're going to go over into the heavies since we already talked about the Lokhust. So, Lokhust heavy destroyers. These guys can come in units of 1, 2, or 3. And they are one of the more unique units in that they can actually be taken cheaply towards the end of roster development. They're 50 points apiece, so they slot in there nicely when you have 50 points that you don't really know what to spend on. Granted, there's some more mission winny type units. Yes, I said winny. With the Scarabs, Tomb Blades, and stuff like that. Tomb Blades costing a little more, or a single Lokhust Destroyer itself at 30 points. These guys still fall nicely in that column, being right around 50 points, where you may want to scrape a little bit to get a couple of them in there, if you haven't already put them in already, because these guys are not an afterthought unit. These are not the, I've put the list together, now what do I do? These guys are a primary staple in a lot of armies. I haven't run a bunch on the channel because of different styles that I've run, but believe me, these guys have been on my radar since day one, and on most people's radar for many editions. A little bit of history, the Lokhust Destroyer, the heavy versions, have always been an interesting unit and a selectable unit for anti-tank firepower that we've needed. Throughout many editions, Necrons, because of our ability to reanimate, we tend to lose a little bit on the damage column, where only a couple of units are actually able to make it over into that realm of being able to do damage. The Doomsday Arc has been one that's kind of held the test of time, usually always being a good, strong gun, although not being the best, usually, it was an option that we had. Lokhust Destroyers, the heavy version, have been another one that we've seen many editions as being an anti-tank option that we bring in, that because of the one of their guns. Now, with the new model kit that we got with the bigger, chunkier one, which some people like, some people don't. I actually do. I just wish their stat line would reflect it a little more. But regardless, we did get a new gun, which also gives us some anti-troop in there too. And boy, howdy does it. So let's get over and start talking about the Lokhust Heavy Destroyer with its stat line. So the Lokhust Heavy Destroyer comes in with the movement of 7, toughness 6, 3-up save, leadership 7, and objective control 2, exactly like their Lokhust counterparts. The difference is going to be in the wounds. These guys are 4 wounds apiece, which that I think can help out a lot when it comes to reanimation and other things. Now, these guys can only be taken in units of 1 to 3, but like many of the things in 40k where now it's minimal size or maximum size, these guys can be taken in units of 1, 2, or 3, which I've seen a lot of people, and it is very compelling. Look at the model size, the base, the range on it. A lot of people have run just a single Lokhust Heavy to be able to move around the backfield, get near your Sovereign Cornell so it hits on 2s, and then also have the ability to still pop into anti-tank. Now, I've said a lot about this guy with the fact of its anti-tank capabilities, and I've also tapped on the fact of the anti-troop. So let's jump over into the guns before we get to the abilities so we can talk about what the ability means for the guns, because it's kind of a little matters. All right, so for this, we have 2 choices of guns. First of all, close combat weapon. Dude's got 2 attacks, weapon skill 3, strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage. Again, that's not what you're taking these guys for, but we got to talk about it. Now, this model, you get to choose between one of 2 weapons, and any number of the models can exchange it. So if you wanted to splash a couple of different weapons in there, you could. Probably not the best way to go with it because of some of the abilities in that. All right, first of all, the tried and true, the Gauze Destructor. This is a heavy weapon, so you get +1 to hit if you sit still. It also has lethal, so that 6 that you get to hit is going to punch right through. 48-inch range, which is huge. That's why people are able to take these as a single model, because these guys can stand in the backfield and snipe. They have 1 shot, hitting on 3s, strength 14, AP 4, flat 6 damage. Now, the other gun on it, the Enmitic Exterminator, tried my best there, is also heavy. Rapid fire 6 with sustained 1. 36-inch range, so a little bit shorter range. 6 attacks. So if you get within 18, you're looking at 12 shots per guy with sustained 1. Ballistic skill 3, strength 6, AP 1, 1 damage. So definitely more of an anti-infantry choice in guns there. So when we look at that, there's a couple of things to think about with all of the guns. And I've heard a couple of people say this with them. The Exterminator, it's a lot of shots. That is one that if you're looking at running it, though, I feel like that is a investment, not necessarily a bad investment, but it is an investment because taking a single one is really not going to give you what you want. Taking 2, well, if you took 2, you might as well take 3. And 3 at 150 points, it's not that bad for 3 guys that all have 6 shots apiece. So we're looking at 18 shots base. Get within 18 inches, and now you have 36 shots with sustained 1 coming off that unit. Now you may say, well, I'm not going to sit still to get the heavy. And honestly, probably this unit is going to benefit from a Lokhust Lord, which we need to go over him because he has a lot, but he will be able to boost the critical from a 6 to a 5. So now that sustained 1, you're going to get that on 5s with 36 shots. And hey, give them the veil. Now you can pick them up and put them right within that 18-inch range. On top of it, all together, spend 1 command point and give these guys reroll all failed wounds. They'll be led by a character, so the extra range buff of it won't matter as much. But still, for 1 command point, you're rerolling all failed wounds. That is a lot of firepower. And hopefully on the channel here soon, once we get through all the destroyer units, I'm going to be building a destroyer-based list. If it ain't destroyers, get it out of here. And these guys will definitely be a part of that list, 100%. But these are not ones that you really, that's not a unit that you really can run a single of. You know, you could. But if you're going to take the single, you might as well take the Gauze Destructor. The biggest reason is, across the board in Necrons, we have a lot of access to different things that are anti-infantry. All the units have some type of thing that can do it. Even our bigger guns with our Doomsday Arcs and Doomstalkers have blast components to be able to take on infantry and horde units. There's not really a lot to be said for taking one of these by itself, as opposed to taking the Gauze Destructor as a solo model by itself. So it kind of, what I have to ask you is, when you get to the point when you have a single 50-point model, what job do you want it to do? For me, there's 2 jobs into it. Number 1, being able to complete secondaries in the backfield or hit a backfield objective. Having 48-inch range means that that's a really good place for that single model to be. Secondly, how much anti-tank have you really put into your list? How much raw damage output can you put in there? And again, flat 6 damage is nice. Now, granted, you got a wound first, but hey, a lethal hit on a 6 and you get right through that. And also, let's get over into these abilities and talk about other ways that you can boost this ability, power and ability, before we talk about more different loadouts you can do with these guys. Because honestly, the sky is the limit in most of the ways. So these guys come with their reanimation protocol, as expected, and then they get optimized for slaughter. And boy, are they. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack with the Exterminator against an infantry unit, re-roll a wound roll of 1. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack with the Gauze Destructor against a monster or vehicle, reroll a wound roll of 1. Now, already right off rip, we're looking at the strength 14 on the Gauze Destructor, which means that most of the vehicles and monsters that we go up against, we probably will be beating their toughness for an AP3. So the 2s will still fail, but we can reroll the 1s. I mean, that's at least 1 pip off of a dice that we're getting a reroll into to have a better chance of being able to get that damage through. With the Exterminators, you're rerolling 1s to wound against infantry. Now, for a command point, we can reroll everything, but to not have to spend that command point and at least get the reroll 1s, that's pretty strong. Their strength is a 6. Terminators, T5, you're wounding them on 3s. So for most of the units that you're going to shoot at with those guys, rerolling a 1 means that you're, again, only failing on 2s. And getting into some of the Tyranid, Eldar, and Horde matchups where we have some T3 units out there, now you're rerolling 2s. These guys are just going to absolutely leaf blower some of those lighter infantry units and absolutely just shred them to pieces. So, we covered everything of what they are. So how should you play them? Well, there's a couple of ways. Let's go now with the Exterminator. I'm a firm believer, if you're running the Exterminators, you got to run a 3-man. You're going to need a Locust Lord in there, and you're going to need a Veil, because you want to make sure these guys can get into position and hit. You shouldn't feel too bad about taking the Veil, and especially taking that Res Orb as well, too. With these guys having 4 wounds apiece, it's going to be tougher to take them out, and some of the damage, that's kind of a weird place for that damage. 3 damage weapons going to take 2 to hit them. 2 damage weapons still going to take 2 to take them out. And with the ability to spend a command point and resurrect and bring those guys back in there, you can really cause your opponent to put way, way more firepower into taking these guys out than they would actually want. On top of the fact with having the Resurrection Orb, even though after you hit, you go into your turn, you may only be at a point where there's 2 in there and one of them might be slightly damaged. When you go into your opponent's turn, you can then get that 3rd one back to at least have that defensive stand. And if you're constantly hitting a corner or a flank with these guys and hitting with other units over there, you're eventually going to get to a point where your opponent cannot remove that 1, or you spend the command point to resurrect and you have the 3, and then reanimation protocol back to full health or getting the guy back in there. And now you start moving across the table once again with the 3 models. That 4th wound really helps out in those situations. Granted, there is a lot of weapons that could absolutely just completely pace the squad in a heartbeat. And you want to try and avoid being in that situation with it. But the Exterminator, you're really going to want to take 3 with the Lord to get the absolute maximum damage output out of that unit. It also then, if you put that much damage into that for that factor, it allows you to kind of dial back on some of your other anti-infantry. Now, granted, a lot of the anti-infantry comes just standard. If you take Canoptic Spiders, the only gun is the Particle Beamer. You know, things like that. There are a lot, like our Gauze Flares, our Gauze Reapers. We have a lot of anti-infantry that's just going to come standard. But you can dial back from it because these guys actually have a very strong, very, very reliable anti-light armor horde control just off these guys. And especially with the Veil, it helps us get around those pesky Tyranids that want to try and lock us in and get right into our face early. These guys are hard to lock down, especially with the Veil of Darkness. Now, once again, opponent crashes into our deployment zone or crashes us early, then we don't even necessarily need to Veil, because once we hit 18-inch range, now we're getting all that extra rapid fire buffs, and we can save that Veil till later in the game. For me, the Exterminators with a 3-man with a Lord is a very, very, very strong tech piece, and I'm looking forward to running it in this build. I might fall in love with it where I end up putting it in more builds in the future. It does, the only weakness I can say for it is we have a lot of anti-infantry in our army already that we are falling into. That I think is why these guys might see a little less play, is because of the stuff that we're already taking to play the game initially, and the units we're taking, it kind of doubles up on it. Now, the Gauze Destructor, that's the big one. That's the big daddy of them all. Because we don't have as much anti-tank. We have the Doomsday Arc that has 4 damage flat. You have the Doom Scythe, spoiler alert, going to be seeing them soon, which can do heavy damage. And I mean, then you have some other little stuff here and there that has like 3 damage here, 4 damage here, et cetera, things. These are solid flat 6 damage for 50 points at 48-inch range. They are mounted, not infantry, so you are not going to be able to go through runes. But you don't need to. You can hide behind a wall, scoot out, and take that shot down a lane and hit something for 6 flat damage. And then do extra damage with your Doomstalkers, your Doomsday Arcs, and things like that to be able to finish it off and pick it up by starting that trend with a big strength 6 hit right off rip. Now, what happens when you go into a matchup that you can't hit that target, and you can't? There's nothing for you to shoot that at. You're shooting at a 1 wound model with a 6 damage weapon. You're like, that's not what this is here for. They still have a 7-inch move, and it is only a 50-point model. They can go hide over in a corner, be there for engage on all fronts, or other secondaries like a cleanse or something that you may need. And that's a unit that can be over there ready to go and do this that you don't feel too bad about because it was only 50 points of your army. Now, what about the bigger bricks? What about taking them in a 2-man or a 3-man? So with the Locusts, both the Locust Heavy Destroyer combinations, I don't think there's ever a time you really want to take a 2-man. I know that, and that's going to be a lot of people who are like, no, I love my 2-man heavies. I love that, blah, blah. Why not just get that 3rd in there? Points, maybe, but I see a lot of the builds that already have the have 2 2-mans that I would rather see a 3-man and a 1, a solo, for a couple reasons. One, you can daisy chain out for the Sovereign Cornell. That's a cool thing. That's a big thing. Number 2, being able to reanimate, taking the hits and still be able to resurrect through it because you didn't lose too many models into it. Having 12 wounds versus having 8 wounds is a big, big selling point to me. For me, I look at the reanimation protocol. I look at that and I look at how much we're getting into it and how much we're investing out of it. I think that taking solos are definitely worth it. Just having that. Yes, can they get drilled and knocked off the table real quickly? Absolutely. Absolutely they can. And so could that 2-man. But the 3-man requires your opponent to actually look at it and put some damage into it. And when you build that 3-man, if you do decide to put a Lord in there, now you're looking at crits on 5-ups. You also have a Resurrection Orb, and you could take the Hypermaterial Albatter and make them stealth, -1 to hit. So I think there's a lot to be invested behind it. And now, if you can't do it, if you don't have the points, and you just want those 2 las cannons. We see it on things like the Gladiator tank. Even though the Gladiator tank has all the rerolls that it gets off of it, having 2 las cannons for 100 points for basically for the Gauze Destructor, I can see it. I wouldn't argue against it. I wouldn't say that you're playing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. I wouldn't argue against it. My belief in this and what I'm going to throw out there, if you're taking two 2-man squads, you should take it in a 3 and a 1. Taking it in a 3 and a 1, you have one that can kind of hang out, go around the corners and get in the backfield, and you have another one that can put firepower down long range with a Lord and all that stuff. Now, again, people may say, well, I don't have the extra points for the Lord, and I'm running off a Cornell. So I'd still say take it in a 3-man for a wider stretch, because it comes down to the reanimation protocols. Once one of them dies, if you lose 1, you spend that command point, or if you lose 2, or you lose 1 and take some damage. Once that first one dies and that triggers for that command point, you can immediately resurrect and start building back into it. And toughness 6, no invuln, but 4 wounds apiece means your opponent's going to have to actually look at these guys and dedicate some guns into them. In the 48-inch range on top of it means you don't have to get up close for extra shots. So now those Gladiator Lancers that are looking at your vehicles are also looking at these Locusts downfield and going, that 3-man squad can ace me in 1 hit. All 3 of those hit, they can wipe you out. So that's why I feel like you should take them in 3-mans. I understand I've seen a lot of 2-mans. And again, if it's working for you, run it. If you like it, run it. My belief and my investment behind it would be to take the 3-mans. And by all means, all means, with this game, this is a game, and I preach that so much more so. This is a game above anything else. If you guys have some reasonings and some thought behind it and disagree with me, please put it in the comments section. Let's start that conversation. I've had a busy week at work. I'm going to be catching, and I know no excuses for it, but I'm going to be catching up on all the comments and getting it back in the comment section and catching up with everybody. Thank you for all the feedback. I do read all of it and love it. Sometimes I start writing something and I'm just like, I don't think I'm conveying the message. So I stop, delete it, take a minute and think about it more. But realistically, let's start that conversation on the two-man unit versus that, and why I feel that if you should go 1 or 3 and not take the 2. Let me know. Let me know what you guys think. I look forward to hearing your comment section, everything in the comment section about this, and we'll start that conversation. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully I didn't make it too long. Lokhust Destroyers, the heavy ones, man, these guys are some cool units. If you don't have them in your army and you haven't run them yet, I definitely highly recommend them, especially because this is one we won't see a new model kit because we just saw one. So, all right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.